Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
You ready, Greg?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean it. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Maggie.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I always struggle with how to greet you. You know, this is not a new thing. So we are going to do a listener Q&A with me and Greg. The first two listener Q&As I did by myself because I was kind of using them as like times when I didn't have anyone scheduled and it was just quick and easy to record. But I put something out on Instagram asking for topics people would like to hear from Greg and myself specifically. And I got a few topics that could be full episodes. For example, Costco Sam's Smash or Pass. That was a good one on like different items and what we like from different ones, but that'll be a future one. I like that idea. But I also got a lot of really good questions that are not full episodes, but that would be fun for us to cover and appropriate for a couple to cover too. And so I thought we should we'll try out a listener Q&A with the two of us and see how that goes.
Yeah, sounds great. There were some good questions, and I appreciate people putting some thought into questions and sending them our way.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's just jump in. Like you said, there were some good questions, and then there were things like pickleball. That's all it said. It wasn't even a question. Just said pickleball.
Yeah, I noticed that. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but...
Yes, I like to play pickleball. It's one of the things I've taken up in early retirement. I play with a bunch of friends. We now have a group of like 8 to 10 of us. I don't know why I'm saying 8 to 10. It's more like 10 probably of us that play. And it's always easy for us to get a foursome together. Sometimes we get a group of 8 together. Sometimes we go to lunch after. It's great. I love it. It's inexpensive. It's
that's
outside.
what I was going to ask. Financially, is it like a relative, people say like, oh, golf's fun, but it's a pretty expensive pastime. And maybe that's not fair. Some golfers might say that's not true, but there can be expensive pastimes. How would you say pickleball sort of?
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, there's some free courts we sometimes play at. We have to drive a little further. I always am like down to drive to the further free courts because, I like free. But the courts we play at that are like really nice and close and easy for everybody to get to, it's $3.50 per person per hour. So every time I play, it costs $3.50.
That's
which
pretty
is
reasonable. Yeah,
nothing. There was a while where I was playing like 3 times a week, and I was like, but it was getting a little, felt like a lot, but it's not that much.
Yeah, anything that's $3.50 an hour is probably pretty low in the...
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about pickleball, if we're really going to do a deep dive, is that, yes, you can take lessons, and you can certainly get better. What I do think is cool about pickleball is its accessibility for beginners, right? So there are some sports that you can't even enjoy it until you've paid a lot of money and spent a lot of time on lessons. Pickleball is something that I think without a lot of lessons, you can enjoy it.
It's got a relatively low learning curve.
Yeah.
Again, you can get much better at it.
And you're going to lose to someone who's really good. But two beginners...
Well, I'm not, to be clear, but you mean like someone might
could.
Lose.
Yes, a very beginner. But 2 beginners can go out and without a ton of time invested...
have a good time.
And hit the ball back and forth.
Yeah. And
Whereas
play the game, yes.
Other sports... they're too
you
can't even do that.
Yeah, I agree. I like it for that. And I play with a group of people that also like, many of them are very good, and much better than me, but nobody takes it too seriously. We have a good time. I just really enjoy it personally. So, okay. So let's jump into some of the more financial related questions that came through, because that one, again, wasn't even a question, just the word pickleball. Okay, I want to hit some of these small ones first, and then we'll work our way up to some of the, what I'd call medium or large size questions. Okay, Greg, what did we spend with intent this year, or our number one buy? And then this person said mine was an Aura ring, which I've heard of. Those are the like sleep rings, and they track some other health stuff.
That's a tough one.
Like, you're not immediately, nothing's coming to mind?
Nothing jumps out super...
Okay, there's one for me, for you, that I believe is your number one purchase this year.
My surgery?
Not your surgery, but
Okay.
it's mildly related to your surgery. But I think you would have ranked it number one even if if your surgery didn't inspire it. Do you know what it is?
Oh, the tushy?
The tushy.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a good spend.
That's like a tushy's like an add-on bidet
Yeah.
for the toilet. What did it cost?
We got the Tushy 3.0, I think. So it was about $99.
Okay, it wasn't the top of the line tushy, right?
No,
Because
no.
there's one that like warms the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got the like stoic version of a tushy where it's like, if you can't deal with some cold water on your bum, like you have to pay more. But we're
Yeah.
like, we can deal with a little bit of suffering and being like, this always makes me think of like, I was never into warmed baby wipes. I was like, no. Like those kids can like feel something cold on them when I'm literally wiping shit off of them. Like, they can take a little bit of pain too in this situation. So anyways, I'm a fan of the tushy too. I wasn't as excited about it as you were when you bought it, but I will say it's lovely.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Probably saving some toilet paper too.
We probably don't need to like keep talking about it, but
Yeah. Good purchase though.
yeah, I'll put a link to the specific one we bought, which again was like $100. And
even to install, relatively easy. The installation guide was how to put this shit together.
yeah, it's fine.
Something
The word
like that.
shit was
Yeah.
like on the front of every manual that came with. Okay, my number one purchase. I thought about it the other day, actually. I think about it frequently, but when I first heard this question, I was like, yeah, I can't think. I don't know. I've like honestly probably bought too many things this year that I really can't put my finger on one thing. But Greg, I want to see if you can guess mine. I'm going to give you some like context clues. When we're in bed at night, I sometimes am like raving about something. I could turn into like a lot of jokes, but I'm always just like, oh, this feels so good. This makes me so happy.
Your silk pillowcase.
A satin pillowcase.
Satin.
Yeah. Silk. Actually, maybe they're silk. I think it is silk. You're right. It is so nice. I mean, and it was like $10 or something. It was not expensive. It is so soft and cooling against my face. And I happen to have some sort of pillow, which I'll have to like look it up, but it's one of those pillows that like sort of claims that it stays cool too. So it's like when I
Coop.
No, that's not why I bought a coupe because
okay.
of the Can at Home talk about. I don't even love the coupe that much,
Okay.
honestly. We bought 2 coupes, returned one of them, and like that's my second pillow. But my main pillow, I could never get like as comfy with the coupe. Anyways, silk pillowcase, like maybe it was $15. I don't know. It was like definitely under $20. It was like a 2-pack. It is so soft and like cool against my face. It makes me happy when I'm going to sleep. And then when I'm waking up, I will literally just like flip my pillow back and forth every few minutes for like the fresh, cool sensation against my skin. And it is just like, literally, I have these like little moments of joy multiple times. Like when I wake up and go to sleep, which are just nice times to feel.
That's the gift that keeps on giving.
It's really amazing.
I mean, not that it was a gift, but
Yeah. I bought it for myself. The kids, a couple of the kids, not all the kids, but a couple of the kids have those pillowcases too. And they're just nice, Like, yeah. I can't imagine having started my life at like 12 with something like that, Gosh. Okay.
where do you go from there?
I'm sure we've spent, I mean, we'll cover this in an early January episode, but we've gone a little off the deep end on our spending this year. I don't even know where it is, honestly. I don't want to know, but I'm going to find out because that's what responsible people do. They face the reality of what they have done financially, and we will face it, but not today, in about a month. And we'll see what that is. And I definitely want to spend less in 2025, not just for money reasons, but just for like intentionality and less stuff. Yeah. Okay. We are moving towards things that are getting more and more financially related. Okay. Any thought of moving away from Bank of America? Can't we do all of the things and earn more money with others? So yes, first off, I mean, we talk about this in a number of episodes. There's an episode that Liz and I did on high yield savings accounts, which I'll put a link in the show notes to. But Greg and I both keep our Bank of America accounts with very little money in them. Like I have like $2,000 in mine, and we primarily keep all of our money in Wealthfront. Right now it is earning 4.25 plus 0.5, so 4.75% total. The 0.5 is when you're on a referral or when you get a referral on either end of it. And so we keep all our money there. We have big bills. We have our credit cards paid out of there. We try to do anything now out of those accounts, but we do still have like, I think like our water bill, something where I had to turn in like a paper form to set up the auto payment is still paid out of my Bank of America. I still like having a Bank of America. I refuse to pay a fee, but I like having a local bank account for some things. And it doesn't cost me any money, and I have those features available when I need them. But I primarily do everything I can out of our high yield savings account. And I think we both have the same approach, Greg.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Bank of America is handy for certain things like Wealthfront right now doesn't have Zelle attached to it. So there's some times where you have to pay with Zelle. Or
our yard guy wants to be paid via Zelle.
Yeah, and there's just certain times where if you need like a cashier's check, which we were doing a car for my daughter, we had to do a cashier. There's just times where it is nice to have a local bank account. But with Bank of America, if you maintain a balance of, I think, $2,000 or $1,750, some amount, then you don't get charged a fee. So it's not costing us. I mean, I guess the opportunity cost of that extra $1,700 being in Wealthfront, generating interest. So there is some small cost, but it is nice to have an account that we could access locally if we need to. And it's very easy to transfer money from Wealthfront to that local bank account.
I mean, we have separate finances, but I would typically, and we even could do this even with separate finances, we could get to the point where only one of us has a Bank of America account. We also have our business account with Bank of America, which is helpful for a bunch of reasons. And so that's for our rental properties. And so I like having both. And again, but I very consciously keep very little money in that account. And we've actually had to change the account type many years ago to make sure that we weren't getting charged any fees. Like we had some sort of nicer account. And then when we weren't keeping enough money in it, we started getting charged a monthly fee, and we called and we're like, whoa, we're not monthly fee kind of people. And they moved us to a different type of free checking account. And so, yes, we have way less features, but when I do need to walk in and get like a cashier's check or something like that, I have, easy access to something. So, but yes, the spirit of that question is, I agree, you should keep the bulk of your money and do as much as you can out of like a high yield savings account. And there's more and more accounts like Wealthfront that now have checking features, and they are also high yield savings accounts. Okay, that was a great question. Related to that, here's another question. And because I mentioned that we have separate finances, which we've done some episodes on. We can put a link in the show notes to us when we've done some episodes, maybe on Friends on Fire we did it, or I don't know when, but we've done an episode where we talk about joint versus separate accounts. So feel free to listen to that. But this question specifically says, do you have some joint accounts and each put a certain amount in, or is everything completely separate? Do you want to take that, Greg?
Sure. Everything is separate. We have one joint account in Wealthfront. There's no money in it, but it is a way for us to transfer large sums of money between each other. So, for instance, we sold a rental property that was in both of our names. We got a check that had to go into one of our accounts, and moving significant money in other ways was tough. So to have a joint account allows us to deposit a check that's made out to both of us and easily move the money. But for practical purposes, we really don't have any joint accounts. We have a method where either one of us will pay for something, and through our expense tracking in Monarch, we denote who paid for it because we see what account it came out of and if it's a shared expense. And at the end of the month, we true up those expenses. So that's the way we handle shared expenses versus moving money into a shared account to then pay for shared expenses, which is why I would assume someone would have a shared account. So no, we do not. We have our own individual accounts, and shared expenses we true up later.
Yeah, and I'll add to this because I think I get so many questions on stuff like this. I think people just find it interesting even when they're not doing it themselves. But we have complete transparency in accounts. So I can see all of Greg's, in Monarch, we can see each other's accounts. Before Monarch and Mint, we could see each other's accounts. We talk about this stuff. Like, I know how much money Greg has in his accounts. He knows how much money I have in my account. And we are very open in like talking about stuff. So we split everything that's like house stuff, utilities,
we go
groceries.
out to eat together, groceries.
Yeah. But every now and then, like I'll have some friends in town, or I'll initiate doing something that's really expensive, and I'll be like, I want to pay for this, or there'll be something for the kids, and I'm like, I want to, but if I go off and just like on my own make a decision to buy a pair of shoes, like that's my expense, right? And same thing with Greg. And so Greg, you bought a MetaQuest recently. And sometimes he's just like wandering around the house with these goggles on. I just think it was funny.
I'm kind of stuck at home for a few months with the shoulder injury. So
Toy. Yeah.
I want a MetaQuest to keep myself entertained. And because it was out of my account, I didn't have anyone to.
Yeah, there was nobody. I mean, we still talk. He was still like, we talked about it, but it wasn't even from a financial perspective. He was just sort of like we live in the same house. And so we talk to each other about stuff. And so it's more that we're like bouncing, like not even ideas off each other, but that we want each other's feedback and input, but we don't need each other's permission, which for us has worked really well. But my other point was just there are certain times where like one of us will say we're treating the other. And the nice thing about it is it's not really like extra work because we're already going through and tracking our expenses. And it's just a tag in Monarch of, when we'll go through something and there's certain times where I'm like, oh, I didn't even mention that to you. Like just put that against me. Cause it was just like a solo decision I made and I wasn't expecting you to chip in on that, whatever that thing is. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful and answers the question. I'll ask a related one is somebody said, just got Monarch, which is the expense tracking tool we use and love. And Greg, look, you're wearing your Monarch hoodie.
I am.
Yeah. Okay, the question was, just got Monarch. It would be neat to hear how you use all of the features for your family tracking. Greg, I'm going to let you cover this, but I will reference Greg did a talk on Campfi all about Monarch and showed a bunch of screenshots, and it's on YouTube. So I will put a link in the show notes to that. But why don't you hit some of the highlights?
Yeah, that'd be great to share that because it's more than we can cover in one episode. But I do love Monarch. I think it's a great tool. They're constantly updating it. I go in and I'll notice like, oh, wow, they just changed this and it's just even easier to use. I think the thing I'll just touch on a little more is what we were just saying is for us, it's important to know what is a shared expense, what's a Maggie expense, what's a Greg expense. We use tags to easily do that. We also use tags for business expenses. So it's easy for me to kind of drill down and say, what's the total Maggie expenses? What's the total shared expenses? And then because the account is also in there, it's easy for me to know who did that purchase. So who incurred that expense. And so it's really easy for me to kind of say, how do we true that up? That's probably the biggest thing, specific to family tracking. But I mean, there's a lot of great tools in there where, I've customized all of our categories, which is really cool. You could kind of do that in Mint, but you couldn't get rid of the existing categories. You just had to add new ones. In Monarch, it's really cool because you can totally customize the categories and then the groupings that those roll up into. So I've done a lot of making sure the categories that we track match the types of things we want to track. We talk about this in some of our spending episodes with the whole team of hosts where, for Liz, it's really important that she tracks certain things related to restaurants. For me, all restaurants go together, whether it's fast food, eating out, that's just an eating out expense. So again, I think make the categories work for you, understand what you want to track and then make those categories customized. Use the tags. They're really helpful. Use the cash flow thing. Is a really good way to like drill down into expenses. So that's at a high level how we use it. But check out the talk I did. Also listen to our episode where we talked about various tracking tools and kind of talk a little bit about Monarch. But it's a great tool. I really like it and highly recommend it.
Agreed. Yeah. So let's hit some more questions. I'm going to hit a related question. Someone said, how do you track your money down to the specifics of the Google Doc? Okay. Well, first off, Greg, I track my net worth religiously every month. How often do you track yours?
Very infrequently.
Okay. But like sometimes I'll be like, oh, the market's really up. You should really like log this puppy because it feels good. Like, have you done it in the past 6 months?
No, I see... In Monarch, I see and in Wealthfront, because I have my other accounts in there. So I kind of see it and where it's, but I don't track it regularly.
But you have tracked it within the last year, right?
In the last year, I believe so. Okay. I mean, when we were building towards retirement, I tracked it very heavily. Yeah. I've stopped, but I don't not believe in the concept of it. I just don't.
You just, I like that answer. Don't do as we do as we say. I track mine religiously. I'm a little like obsessive about it, only in the sense of like, I just think it's really fun. I mean, lately it's just, going up because the market's doing so well, but I just think it's a fun piece of data. It literally takes me 5 minutes once a month, and to give this person what they asked, down to the specifics. I have a Google sheet. Every column is a month, and I do it on the, I only really started doing it this way it's right here, in July of 2019. And then I once found some old docs where I had tracked it in 2016, and I went in and like manually added that to the sheet also. So I can kind of go back to 2016, which is crazy because it's gone up a lot in 12 years. But so I have every column is a month. And so it'll say, July 2019. And my most recent column says I'm on BQ. So I've been through the alphabet a couple times, or almost twice now. And that's a cell reference, by the way, BQ. If any people that love spreadsheets would recognize that. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. It doesn't need to. But I have December 1st in there. And then on my rows, I have every account I have. So I list my Bank of America checking, my Wealthfront high yield savings account, my Fidelity checking, because I technically have a checking account with my Fidelity brokerage account, my Fidelity brokerage account, I even list like my credit cards, which I don't think you need to worry about, and I haven't been dealing with much lately, but I then have my HSA, what's now my IRA, my deferred compensation plan, my Roth IRA, my kids 529, the value of our house, our rental property value and mortgages, and our rental business account. And all that rental stuff is split in half because we each own half of it. And so I have my individual net worth tracked here. And I always am telling Greg what it is. Like every month, even though you don't track yours every month, he hears me every month and is like, oh, guess what it is now? And I make him play like Price is Right. I'm like, guess how high it is now? And so that is what it is. It is a very simple spreadsheet. And then below that, I have some numbers where I have like subtotals of like the liquid amount, the illiquid amount. And the liquid amount is like, cash, brokerage, stuff I can get to easily. And the illiquid is stuff like my IRA and 529 accounts, my house, stuff like that. And then I do a few calculations at the bottom on like month over month increase, year over year increase, etc. That's it. It's very simple. It takes me 5 minutes to update all my accounts. I literally I could just open Monarch, but sometimes Monarch might be like a little bit behind a day or two on the balance. And so I typically actually open the app just to check the amount and then log it in at the first of every month. And if I miss the first, I'll do it on the second, and I'll write that date in my sheet. That's it. It's very easy.
Yeah, and then we track expenses in Monarch 6 months, halfway through the year, and at the end of the year, we pull that out of Monarch and into an Excel sheet, and we kind of just look at how much we spent this year and kind of what we spent, by category.
Yeah. And then we discuss it on a
expense
podcast.
Side of tracking, and that's pretty much it. We've done spreadsheets at various times when we've kind of been doing scenario planning and kind of a few little ad hoc things. But those are the two real consistent tools that we use to track money.
Yeah. I have like a life planning sheet that I use at times, which just maps it out by year up until I'm like 100. And I've used something like that with coaching clients too at times. But yeah, that's pretty much, the most we do is or 90% of what we do is net worth tracking and expense tracking. Okay, so there's a number of relationship-y ones in here. So one is, how do you guys manage difficult financial convos? Your relationship is one I admire. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah. Greg, how do you manage difficult financial convos? Or do you want me to start? Do you want me to tell you how you should manage difficult?
Yeah. Why don't we start there? That's the right answer. I defer to you.
That always helps, actually, that approach, just joking, sort of. I would say, having separate finances helps, but it's not the only solution. And to many couples that could create more issues, right? And I say that as in everybody is different. Know yourself, know what works for you. We met later in life. We had already had kids. We had, you're paying child support, I'm receiving. We just had a lot of unique things, and we're older at that point. And it worked out for us. And, who knows if we'll do it forever or what we'll do, but it's working. We still at times get into conversations that have some aspect of a financial nature to it. And, I would say, one thing that I try to do, and I think you would recognize this, Greg, because I literally like use this word, is, I mean, I am vulnerable with you, and there are things that I have financial hangups about, and, you know, we've talked about bag lady syndrome and other things, and when we do have difficult conversations, I'm vulnerable, and I tell you where something is coming from and why I feel the way I feel about something. I don't just get emotional about something, you know, I like explain it to you, and I really try to like tell you whether it's rational or not. I try to tell you like where I'm coming from with it. And in that is a lot of vulnerability and like what I'm afraid of and why I'm coming from a particular approach. And I think that helps.
Yeah, I agree. I agree you do that, and I try to listen, and, you know, I think this just goes beyond financial stuff, but I think earlier on in our relationship, I would maybe get a little more quick to like get defensive or get a little more like, and I really tried to just hear you and hear what you're saying and hear where it's coming from, and try to not personalize it and get upset or, you know, get all mopey about it, and just really listen to what you're saying and try to hear you out, and then try to express how I'm feeling and where I'm coming from. And I think listening is an important part of every relationship, and in difficult conversations is hearing where the other person's coming from and really trying to understand where they're coming from, because it's easy to be frustrated at someone and say, why are they reacting this way? It just doesn't make sense. But if you hear them out, you can understand where they're coming from. Whether or not they're handling it in the same way you would handle it is kind of irrelevant, because they're not you. And if you hear where they're coming from, you're then able to at least speak to that or understand it and kind of sit with that for a little while and figure out how to react or how to, you know, change something. And I don't know.
Compromise, maybe even in the
yeah.
end. Yeah, I think, you know, first off, we did an episode on this back at Friends on Fire, I remember, about how to talk to your partner about money. And I'll put a link in the show notes to it. So I'd recommend going and listening to that episode if this is a topic you want to think more about. But ultimately, I think being honest, right? Like, don't hold feelings in, but like, be honest with your partner, share things vulnerably, share things nicely and calmly. And, or, you know, is calmly a word? Yeah. Okay. But, you know, getting all heated up and in the moment about something, you know, like I always hear people say, put some space between like your reaction to something and like actually dealing with it. You know, like don't send that email off when you're angry. You know, you don't need to come at your spouse or partner when you're real fired up about something. Like even just 10 minutes of like walk away and take a breath and think about it. And I think, you know, both of us, Greg, though we've certainly had our moments at times, most of the time we're pretty good about talking it through, which is half of the battle, right? So when it says like, you know, the question was, how do you guys manage difficult financial conversations? We actually have conversations and we are honest and vulnerable with each other, even if we don't always agree, right? I think there's a lot in just talking things through and not keeping something bottled up and not saying something, right? And so I think half the battle is just saying something and saying it in an honest, vulnerable, calm way to your partner and initiating a discussion about it in the right time, right? Don't hit somebody with it on their way out of the door for work when they can't do anything about it, or on their way in the door from work when they just are trying to decompress for 5 minutes, right? And so, yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think so too. And sometimes you'll express something and then you'll kind of say, you know, I'm sorry if that's stressful, or if you know, and I try to just always say, no, I would much rather you express how you're feeling than hold it in. And the space thing is good too. Not just when you bring something, but when someone brings something to you, you're kind of, as I was saying earlier on, your first reaction might be to get defensive or to try to kind of counter what they're saying. And sometimes I just sit with it for 30 seconds. And I think sometimes when I do that, you're, you know, you'll almost be like, or maybe earlier on when I started doing that, you're like, but I just need a second to sit with it, because my first thing might be to defend myself. And when I sit with it for 30 seconds or a minute, I can then say, yeah, I can see how you feel. And like, let me also express though my thoughts and express kind of my headspace of why I did what I did or whatever. And so I think those are good things, good points. You know, a little bit of space and expressing yourself and giving each other the space to express how you're feeling.
Yeah.
That's
No,
pretty important.
I agree. Well said. Here's a quick one. Well, it's a big question, but I think the answer is fairly quick. So this person says, social worker and earn $58,000 a year. Love the pod, but feels unattainable. Have credit card debt too. Okay, I'm going to give a quick answer, if I've ever given a quick answer to anything, if that's possible. Do we think it's possible, Greg?
No comment.
Okay, that's fair. First off, this podcast is not only meant to be for early retirement, it's meant to be a general financial advice podcast. So I hope it meets that goal because, when it says, feels unattainable, I understand how early retirement could feel unattainable to some people. But I do want to remind people early retirement and the concept of kind of getting to FIRE or really getting to any sort of financial independence is just the math of the difference between, what you make and what you spend. So there are people who make $200,000 a year and they spend $200,000 a year. So every year they are earning nothing towards their future. They are living paycheck to paycheck at $200,000 a year. There are people who make $40,000 a year and spend $20,000 a year. Every year they're earning a whole extra year's worth of freedom and saving that, and it's earning compound interest and it's going to grow over time. And so at $58,000 a year, that's not the magic number, right? That's not the number that really matters. Obviously, if you can make more over time, that's helpful. But what really matters are your expenses and what you're willing to do to get those expenses down, right? And so, there's people who live with their parents for some period of time. There's people who do house hacking and have a roommate or buy a duplex and rent out half of it. And so there's all types of things people could do at any salary. There are people who have been teachers who get to early retirement. There's also people who had higher salaries like myself and Greg, and we didn't have goals of early retirement when we were younger. So a lot of it is just the difference between how much you make and how much you spend. And then also the amount of money as a result of that you are able to invest, and then the time it has to grow and to earn more and more compound interest over time. And those are really the factors you want to think about, right? So obviously paying down that credit card debt as quickly as you can. So though something like early retirement might feel unattainable, getting to a really strong spot in your finances shouldn't be unattainable, right? And again, everyone's got to make trade-offs in life, right? So it could mean moving to a lower cost of living area. It could mean, again, like house hacking and some of the examples I gave. And everyone's got their own reality of what they are and aren't willing to do to get to some level of financial freedom, but that's a personal choice. And it certainly could be easier at higher salaries, but you've also got tons of people at higher salaries that have really drastically increased their cost of living and done a lot of lifestyle inflation. And they would argue it's, just as hard for them. And so I wouldn't get stuck in thinking that it's unattainable at a lower salary. I would really think about controlling what you can control and deciding what trade-offs you're willing to make to get to a better financial position, if that makes sense.
The only thing I would add to that too, I think everything you said is right on. And I think, certainly sensitive to with a lower salary, it is harder. But I think also if the thought of early retirement right now does not feel like an attainable goal, that doesn't need to be your short-term goal. Your short-term goal might be, I'm going to get out of credit card debt.
Yeah,
and I'm going to do what it takes to get out of credit card debt. I'm going to get cash flow positive. That was my goal when I came out of my divorce, was I'm going to be cash flow positive. And it took that step to get that and go, wow, that's a win under my belt. What's next? And so I think don't let this goal that seems so big prevent you from starting somewhere. And so maybe the inspiration for this podcast in the shorter term is to get your expenses down, to get out of credit card debt, to develop an emergency fund that allows you to feel some sense of security that if something terrible happened and you couldn't work for a couple months, that you have that money. So I think, start with the things that are attainable. But like Maggie said also, don't give up on the goal of reaching some level of financial independence, because it is possible for many people.
Okay. Let's hit a few questions that are related to spending on kids. And I addressed a number of kids spending questions in one of the other listener Q&A episodes, and I'll put a link in the show notes to those previous episodes if you want to hear more about spending on kids. But these questions for us, Greg. So here's the first one that's kind of broad. How to raise kids to be thrifty and spend intentionally, but not give them scarcity mindset. Hard. is what they wrote after that. It is
Agree.
hard. Yeah.
Yes, it is hard.
Welcome to two
Raising
people.
kids is hard.
Yeah, raising kids is hard. I was going to say, welcome to two people with 3 teenage girls right now. And the idea of spending intentionally is tricky, right? Do you have anything like burning you want to start with, or you want me to jump in, Greg?
I mean, I have thoughts, but I can...
Why don't you start? By the way, Greg lives in a house with 4 women, and I just want to give you the floor for that reason alone. Because there's a lot of times that Greg tries to say something, and like 2 to 4 other people, girls, are all talking to him at once. And he's like you're like a trooper. You're a really good girl dad and husband.
Well,
just
thank you.
FYI.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting because I had a conversation with a friend today kind of about this general philosophy of things. And I think some of it comes back to what do you spend on and spending intentionally. And for us, not that we always do great about this, but in general, we said we want to spend on experiences and spend less on material things. Because getting to the whole philosophy of die with zero, and you don't want to die with a bunch of money in the bank with regrets. And I think about what are the things I will regret when I'm older. If I'm getting close to death, I will likely regret not spending quality time with my family. I may regret some experiences I didn't take, some travels I didn't do. I don't think I will regret not buying a nicer car or doing an add-on to my house or, some material thing. So we talk to the kids about that, and we certainly spend less on them. There are times where they say, hey, can we, if they had it their way, we would be getting Starbucks runs every day.
Yeah.
And we often say,
creamery.
No, we can't do that. For us, when the kids are with us, once a week maybe we do like a Starbucks run. And they also know the converse of that is that we do really cool trips. And we say to them, they say, this is such a cool trip and I'm so glad we do this. And we say, I'm so glad you appreciate it and we love doing this. And these are why we don't spend on some of the other things that we choose not to spend on. So every time we say, guys, sorry, we can't do this. We can't go out to eat tonight. We're not going to do Starbucks. Those are the small decisions we're making so that we can take these big trips. And it sinks in and the kids start to understand it. And so I think they understand there are things that are worth spending money on. So again, to that question, not having this scarcity mindset where they won't spend it all. And sometimes too, I mean, there are things Maggie and I will splurge on for ourselves. And we say to the kids, like, this is something I've really been thinking about. And I didn't buy this on a whim. I really thought about it and I sat with it and I waited. And you know what? I decided this was something I really wanted to spend for myself. And there's probably several other purchases I won't make because I made this. And I think that gets to that point to the kids of like, this isn't scarcity, but it's spending intentionally and not making certain decisions that allow us to make other decisions. Trade-offs.
Sometimes, I'm going to just comment on a few things you said, Greg. Sometimes in those examples where we're buying something for ourselves, sometimes I will, like in a little bit of a snarky but honest way, my answer sometimes is, I have a job and I earned this money, so I'm choosing to spend it. And that's my decision, right? And it's funny, sometimes when I say I have a job now, I'm like, well, you know what I mean. I had a job and I saved all that money. But this is money I earned myself, right? And I think that's important, but like just to double click on one of the things you said, Greg, we talk to our kids about money all the time. So when we are just out doing day-to-day things, and I highly recommend this, right? This is one of the problems with money is people don't talk to their kids about it. So they don't forget like talking to your kids about the stock market and explaining how that works. Just talking to your kids about day-to-day decisions and trade-offs and intentional spending and things like that is important. And we've been doing it since they were very little. And we notice they all have different patterns and habits around money. They're all very different at different times. And so like some of them are kind of savers, some of them are spenders, and you see different habits, but we talk very openly about it. And like Greg, a few times earlier, you said, when they ask for things that we'll say, we can't do that. We actually talk pretty openly that we won't do it, that we're not doing it because we are saving for, all the time I say, nope, saving for college, because I want them to know it's not, and I say all the time, I'm like, I could afford that. I don't want to. Would you rather do that, or do you want to go on a trip this summer? And that actually not that my goal is not to shut them up, but that makes them stop and think pretty quickly. And we'll get answers back where they're like, oh yeah, we really like taking those trips. And we're like, cool. And our kids are unique, not from anyone, but from some families where, we're a blended family. So our kids go off to other people's households for, about half of the week, and they see other spending habits and other things. And by the way, kids adjust very quickly. Like, you'll hear that from psychologists. Like, they can adjust to different household norms and expectations very quickly and very easily. And they have, and they know what our habits are, and they know what we will and won't do. And half the time, like, they're quick learners, and they see what you're doing, they hear what you're doing, and then we purposely talk to them. And I think that's a huge way that we are raising our kids to spend intentionally, but also to not have a scarcity mindset, because we often do splurge on things, and we explain to them why we're splurging and that we value that, and that we do and don't value this. And we even talk about it with eating out sometimes, right? And like, we had some like terrible experience eating out recently. It was like a few months ago. And we were like, this is why we don't eat out more often. Like, it's more comfortable to eat at the house, and we can make what we want, and like, all these things. So the other thing that we really push a lot to help, in addition to them like learning it from us, is we really push a lot of like independence and accountability. They have earning opportunities, and then they have to spend their own money to do a lot of things. So, a lot of there's like a big social thing lately is like kids eating out with their friends, no parents involved. Even with like my 12-year-olds often eat out with their friends. And I'm always like, I just think it's funny. I wasn't doing that when I was 12, right? I don't think you were.
Not the way they do. No.
Yeah. I mean, they do it like once a week, I feel like, on a weekend night, on a weekend, they're going to a restaurant to meet just their friends. And we're like, cool, we're not even eating out as a family. So like, if you want to go eat out with your friends, like, you're spending your allowance, you're spending your money, like, that's your expense. And right, again, they have opportunities to earn money. But for me, that's one of the other big things that teaches them some level of accountability. And there's times when we'll treat them, or there's times when, that's not always the case. But a lot of the time when they want something that is a nice to have, they have to spend their own money on it, or it's a gift for a holiday, for their birthday, or for Christmas, or something like that. Okay, that we actually got a few questions that were kind of all related. I'm not going to read them, but hopefully that addresses that. A similar question: how do you approach holiday traditions or changing them from spending a lot on gifts to experiences? Well, I think it's pretty similar to like some of the stuff we just said, but I will say early on, when the kids were really young, we encouraged all of our parents and like my brother, which are really the bulk of their like, close family, to put money in their college fund or give them money for gifts instead of like stuff they don't need. And everybody's been pretty, and or gift us an experience. So like, your dad always will like gift us some sort of a family pass to like some place in Atlanta, like the Botanical Gardens or the zoo, or like we'll do something different every year. And so we've gotten family on board with that. And then, we'll do like we did like a 10-year-old birthday trip for each of our kids, a solo trip. And so we've done the same thing, but we do still like buy Christmas presents for our kids. And, it's just it's a lot of stuff like clothes and things they need, and, stuff they want. I shouldn't say things they need, stuff they want.
Yeah.
We definitely are more limited in the physical stuff, and just in general spend, if you were to look at the total amount we spend on our children, we spend more on travel than we do on stuff for them. Yeah. And or like activities. So like, we don't mind spending on like club volleyball is kind of expensive, but like, that's an experience and an activity.
And I think at Christmas we do sort of loosen up the purse strings a little bit, and
yeah,
they give us gift wish lists and things they want, and because we're not constantly kind of buying them stuff as much, I think we feel like Christmas is a time of year where we do buy them some gifts. And
yeah,
I think everything in moderation.
Yeah. Can we discuss what's currently under the tree for the kids, though, Greg? There's the kids don't listen to this, and if they do, they'll listen to it. I don't think anyone listens to this, but any of our kids, I can't put this on social media because they do follow us on social media. I like to just have like boxes under the Christmas tree, but it's only December 4th. And so it's like, I've wrapped a few things in the last couple of days. The kids are already like shaking them. They're like, what's this? And one of my kids is convinced one of the presents is Legos. And she was like really excited. She's like, I know this is Legos. And she's like shaking it a certain way. And I was like, stop shaking it. You're going to break it. But it's like a box of like the Nutella dipping sticks from Sam's Club. And then another present is like a big like Sam's Club size box of pads. I got 3 girls. Sorry. And I think there's a thing of Easy Mac macaroni and cheese. Some other like consumable treats, a big thing of like Kinder Bueno chocolate bars. It's just like silly stuff that I mix in. They also get like real presents of like stuff they wanted and, needed. But I also like to mix in like consumables and like stuff they need. But I've been watching them guess about this stuff. Greg was like, oh, well, she was like really excited that she thought we got our Legos. So he's like, now I actually got to get her some Legos. I didn't even think the kids were into Legos anymore. Okay. Off topic or semi-related. Here's an interesting question. You don't have to elaborate on this too much, but I thought this was interesting. Opting out of traditional American living and leaning towards communal living.
Is that a question or a statement?
I think it's
or...
like pretend there's a question mark after it. It's like the pickleball one. Pickleball? Well, I did say what topics do you want us, so it wasn't worded as a question.
Yeah, topics. Okay, well then, it's a tough question because it's not something we are at a point in our lives where we can do. We've talked about this.
I think we do have communal living right now. I live in a house with like 3 teenage girls.
Wow.
I feel like I live on a commune with like, but I do all the work. I mean, me and you do all the work.
Yeah.
Is that how communes work?
Well, I
That's
guess
not the
so.
that's the opposite of the definition of a commune, because I think a commune is everybody puts some work in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are not living in a commune.
I mean, I think it's cool. I'm fascinated by the thought of sort of living less of the traditional lifestyle. I think it's, I enjoy watching shows about people who do that.
You once drove somebody that lived in like one in Atlanta.
Yeah, it was, I forget the term they used. Maybe it was sort of a communal sort of thing. It was a group that lived in a neighborhood, and they jointly had to manage the garden, and I guess it is somewhat communal, and it seemed really interesting. I mean, I love the idea of village, of community, of smallness of community and closeness, and
but I also like my privacy.
Yeah, it's funny.
Autonomy is a better word. I like my autonomy.
Yeah, I love the idea of it. I'm not sure I'm ready for it completely, but
Yeah.
So my response is not meant to be dismissive because I think it's a really cool thought. And then, away from like communal living and like homestead living sounds interesting. People who do that. Again, I love the thought of it. I
Yeah.
can daydream about it.
I can watch
don't
shows
know
about it, yeah.
if that's
What we're made
practically
for.
where, but I think it's really cool, and I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'd
Yeah.
like to learn more about it.
If our kids were like in college and somebody said to me, hey, do you want to go live in this like experimental communal living community for 3 months? I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll try it out. I'm not going to like sell all my crap and go buy a new, you know what I mean? Actually, shout out to Steven from Camp Fi. He's building like a fire community in like near Warner Robins. Is it near Warner Robins?
I don't know.
Somewhere in Georgia. And yeah, I don't know a ton about it, but it's a fascinating I love the idea of it. And it's one of the reasons I love our community that we live in now, because I do think there is a very big community vibe and people help each other out. And there's a very active like Facebook group. And I mean, if I message on Facebook that I need any piece of equipment, I guarantee you tomorrow I could have it borrowed from a neighbor, right? And I love that element of community
we have a very
living.
nice sense of community.
But yeah, I'm not sure that I'm there yet. So, okay, semi-related question, just because it's about the future. Greg, this is a cool question. Whether you think you'd do any kind of employment once the kids are in college?
I think so. I mean, we do some sort of, employment's not the right word. We do things right now.
We have
whether
rental
it's
properties.
real estate, and
Yeah, we
I do
spend
some Uber
time,
driving, and I'm currently trying to figure out how do I want to spend my time more meaningfully, and some of that may be generating income. So yeah, it's very possible. I don't ever see myself wanting to go back to a traditional white collar job where I'm working in a big organization. So I have some
And
red lines,
full-time.
but in full time.
Would you add full time to that?
Probably, yeah.
I would.
But I'm certainly, yes, probably of some sort. One thing I said to Maggie, we said to each other when we were leaving our jobs is, this is not the end of us being productive members of society. And I feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
I want to figure out how do I use my time in a way that feels like I'm doing something that benefits the world. And I don't mean in some grand, lofty, sense of saving the world, but just doing something that contributes.
Yeah, I agree. And I would argue I do feel like I'm contributing to society, and I have been in the last 2 years. Like, I do a lot of different volunteer work, volunteer roles. Greg, you do less of those directly, but you do a lot through me because I sign up for crap, and then like you end up helping me with a lot of stuff. And so, with the podcast and other things, like I feel like I'm doing something meaningful with my time. And like we've talked a lot about, and I'll put a link in the show notes to this episode, but we kind of do some like early retirement check-ins of just how we're feeling and doing throughout the last 2.5 years. It's crazy that it's been 2.5 years now, but we're thinking of the next 5 years. We have 5 more full years when any of our kids we have 2 years where we have one kid going off to college in 2 years, and then our last kid will go off to college in 5 years. So we have 5 years of having kids like, that are in high school under our roof. And we're thinking of things in phases, right? So our next 5 years are still focused on the kids and being here for them and being available. And we're not going anywhere for any extended period of time because of that. When our kids are all off in college, we want to do some long-term travel, and we want to go like live in Italy for 90 days and like, bum around some areas. And like Greg just smiled like very sincere when I said that, because I get excited thinking about that, right? But that's not now. And so my main answer to that question is I have no idea, and it's not something I can even decide or fathom, but I wouldn't rule anything out, but I probably agree with Greg of like, I don't ever envision myself working a demanding corporate America full-time job ever again. I do think we will do things that make us money at some point again in our life, but probably not large amounts of money, right? Unless we end up, kind of fall into something entrepreneurial that just like blows up or something. But my goal will not be to make a lot of money, because it's just not what I'm focused on right now. But again, I can't tell you what it's going to feel like to be an empty nester, because so much of our time and energy goes towards our kids right now and the lifestyle that is related to us having kids. I mean, entire, like 6 months of, 4 to 6 months of like our weekends are like at volleyball tournaments and stuff. So it's like, I can't even like fathom what it would think about to have like weeks on weeks of free empty time. And I'm not worrying about it, because I'll deal with that when it comes, and I'll learn and I'll adjust, and we'll check in with each other, and we'll figure out what the next, adventure ahead has in store for us. Okay.
I think we answered that question.
I think we did.
Very thoroughly.
Very thoroughly. I really like the person who submitted that question, so I wanted to really give a thorough answer. And I like thinking about that myself. It's a good
it is fun to think
reminder.
About, for sure.
Okay. I'm going to hit a couple more, and then we're going to wrap this up. This will be a long episode. Oh, okay, good one. I also really like this person. There's not really a lot of people I don't like, but I really like this person. How did your stress level change after retirement? Did it improve or get channeled into new things?
You should start, because I think we both have somewhat, unique answers based on our personality and what we've done.
I mean, I definitely have been much more committed to volunteer / extracurricular activities since I left work 2.5 years ago. So for me, though my stress level did change, I mean, it definitely went down. I think I would have to say that. It also did get channeled into new things. And I did learn a lot about myself, in that there are just certain ways that I am wired, and it's more about me and my reaction to things and how I process and deal with things than it is the like stimuli, right? Which for a long time was work and a fairly demanding job that I did enjoy. And when that went away, it's like, I still get worked up about certain things, right? I am in a volunteer role, and I'm getting frustrated that someone's not doing whatever they're supposed to do, but they're not getting paid. So I guess not, I can give them feedback the way I could give somebody on my team feedback, right? And so it's just it's like very different. The stakes are so much lower though. And it's very easy for me to remind myself, I could walk away from any of these things at any moment with no repercussions to my future, my security, like when I had a job, I couldn't, at the time I couldn't, especially when I didn't have goals of early retirement, I couldn't fathom like not having insurance or not having a paycheck. And so I would never have just like walked away from something. But now anything that's bothering me too much, I mean, I still take pride in what I do. And when I commit to something, I want to follow through. But if something was really like bothering me or a toxic environment, I could just leave and be like, I'm not going to do this anymore, And with that comes an amazing level of confidence and freedom and other things. And so, yeah, I think like two things can be true. Like, yes, my stress level did not just magically go away. It did get channeled into other things, but also it improved. And I overall, though we've gone through a lot of emotions and kind of phases in early retirement, which again, we've recorded like entire episodes on this, so I'm not going to like rehash it all. But I think in the past 6 months, I personally have like hit my stride the most of just being in a really good place, like mentally and emotionally. And it's not perfect. There's still, I get stressed out about stuff with the kids. I get stressed out about politics, all sorts of things, right? But I feel very good about like where I'm at in life, and I'm really enjoying my freedom. And some days I sleep till 10 o'clock, and I mean, I'll like get up and deal with the kids. Or by get up, I mean, I'll lay in bed like half awake, listening to Greg deal with the kids. And then when they leave, I'll fall back asleep till 10 o'clock. That's what I do some mornings on my satin pillowcase or my silk pillowcase. And it's like lovely. Greg, how about you?
Well, I think that was a really good answer. And I identified with a lot of what you said. I think not being in a job doesn't magically make life happy all the time, especially through an adjustment period. Mm-hmm. There is quite an adjustment period, and you will go through a range of emotions. And as you said, the way you're wired is not going to change automatically. I still get anxious about stuff. I realized, like, I thought for a long time, once I'm not working, I'm going to learn another language. Once I'm working, and I've come to learn that sometimes the job was an excuse for why I wasn't doing things. I'm still the same person who sometimes has trouble figuring out what I want to put my energy into and just get started with it. So
that's what I was going to say, getting started.
Yeah. So you still are who you are. You are still wired the same way. You are still going to have stressors. And sometimes not having a job to go focus on, the things that used to feel more mundane all of a sudden feel a little bigger because they're your only focus and the job is not taking you away. All of that being said, I think you said it perfectly. The stakes are lower. I am certainly less stressed not working. I still get stressed. I am still a person who is a human, and a human who's susceptible to anxiety. That is still my makeup. But I am much less stressed. I am more comfortable in my own skin, not feeling like I have to fit into a corporate environment that was
maybe not a great fit for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually think corporate environment was a better fit for me than you, the more we like delve into things. But you did it for 20 years and you made money and you did a good job and you had a good reputation. But I think
I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I think I'm happier. I'm certainly less stressed out. So, long answer. The short answer is yes, I believe it is less stressful. You will still be stressed about things. You will still be the same person you were before. Yeah. Those personality traits that you thought, oh, this is just because of work. They're still there.
Yeah. And you got more time and energy to stress about stupid shit. What's funny is I mean, that's, if anything, the things I would get worked up about were way less important. Like the things in early retirement, because work was a big distraction from a lot of things. I was so busy. We were both so busy at work. There was only so many other things you worried about in life, right? You just had to like let a lot of other stuff go. And when all that other stuff it's like the big rocks are all gone and out of the way. Now you can stress about the small rocks.
Well, right. You know, it's easy to say, oh gosh, I'd be a more involved parent if I, wasn't working so much, but I'm doing the best I can and that's enough. And when you're not working and you feel like you are maybe not supporting your kid in the way they need to be supported. And when I say supported, I mean, or pushed or held accountable to something. Yeah. Then when you don't have a job as an excuse, you start going, man,
you start looking at yourself.
What am I doing? But that's a good thing. That's called growth. And that's called, looking in the mirror and growing. So yeah, I think we've covered that one, but it's a great question.
If I could afford the rights, I would start playing Man in the Mirror right now. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Oh my gosh, Greg gave me a look like he doesn't love me anymore.
No, that's not true. It's more just like kind of probably how the kids look at us. Like they get a little embarrassed of us sometimes.
Like that a lot. The other day we dropped the kids off at volleyball and we had to go in to like help with sizing their uniforms. And we were like, it's like, 10 feet from the car to the door. And they're like, could you walk in behind us so it doesn't look like you came in with us? And I was like, everyone knows we drove you here. What do you mean? Like, they know who we are. Like, you're not like keeping up some facade. Like, we're not with you. Anyways, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a good question. We're not going to cover it because we are going to cover it with the whole group. But I really like the way this was stated. 2025 intentions, not New Year's resolutions. And I love that. Like, what's your intention, not just what's something you're going to accomplish. So great question, but we're going to hold off on that one. But I still wanted to give a shout out to the person who asked that question because I like the way they phrased it.
Yes. Thank you, Sebastian. So we'll cover it like next week or I don't know, sometime before the end of the year. I'm going to cover some of these because if people are asking, they probably haven't heard us talk about it in previous episodes. So someone said asset allocation and drawdown strategy in early retirement. That's an entire episode topic, which we could do. And we've done a number on that are pretty close to this. And we've covered it. We covered like bits and pieces of it. in a lot of episodes. I'll say a couple things though. We are not, we don't have a really like sophisticated, detailed drawdown strategy. I think we will have a more advanced one as we continue to get further into early retirement. Right now, the bulk of our drawdown is, I have a deferred compensation plan and I don't control those amounts that come out every year. They're already set based on, some other rules, which I've talked about in other Q&A episodes, which I'll put a link in the show notes to. But that is a big chunk of what we're living off of, in addition to, we're still living off cash, right? And, cash that's earning interest. We just sold a rental property, which actually wasn't necessarily in our plans, but we did decide to do, and that has given us even more cash to live off of. And, we will eventually start to sell off some investments, probably at different paces between Greg and I. And we'll do that as we need to, and it'll be out of our brokerage accounts. And we may eventually do some Roth conversions, on the 5-year waiting piece with that, the ladder. And we're still kind of working through when and if we'll do that, but we haven't started it yet for a number of reasons. But the reason I kind of like, Andrew and I talked about this recently, it's hard to talk about this, like even if we told you ours, everybody's different, right? Because like I have a deferred compensation. Greg had a version of a similar, it was a 457B because he worked for a nonprofit, but everybody's drawdown is different based on whether they have a pension. I mean, we did some case studies. Andrew and I did some case studies recently where people had really big pension payouts. And so that was the equivalent, and we did the math and gave that example, but that was the equivalent of them having $2 million in brokerage in terms of how much they were getting from their pension each month. And so it's just going to be very different for everybody, whether it's like I've got DCP, which is the equivalent of me drawing down, but someone else is kind of choosing the drawdown schedule for me. And other people have, millions of dollars sitting in a brokerage account. They're slowly drawing down from that at a slower rate than it is growing at. And some people might be drawing down at a faster rate than it is growing at, right? It just depends on the size of their overall assets and, how quickly they need to draw it down based on their expenses. So everybody's is going to be different. And so we don't share the like complete details of we share like our expenses and stuff like that. We do not share our overall net worth and assets. But even if we did, it's like interesting to hear, but it's still, everybody's is going to be different, I guess is my point. So thought I'd speak to that a little bit. Anything you want to add on that, Greg? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Last question, and a good one to wrap it up on. End of year tax optimization things that we are doing. Let me tell you what I'm doing. We're not doing a lot, honestly. Mainly because there's just not a lot we can do at this point. The one thing that is unique for us this year is we sold a rental property, which was Greg's very first home. And so it's just been in his name for a really long time, which means the appreciation on it is high. So, the amount he originally paid for it versus what we sold it for, it's a big increase. And that's considered capital gains. And so we will have to pay taxes on that. And what that will essentially do is knock us out of any eligibility for a ACA healthcare subsidy this year, which we got, our last 2 years, and we will not get for we got the first year before this, and we won't get it for 2024. We'll have to basically pay back the subsidy in our taxes, which we've been planning on and expecting since we sold that property a few months ago. And the only other thing we're kind of thinking about is, because this is the year that we're already taking that subsidy hit, we're just kind of thinking like, I might do a little bit of conversions into a Roth IRA while I'm already losing the subsidy. Because it's hard to like get into a detailed answer without knowing the specifics of, all of our income.
But it's kind of the opposite of, instead of optimizing to lower our taxes, this year might be the year we say, well,
take a big hit.
Let's do some things that are going to count as income because we're already
losing our subsidy.
Yeah.
We're kind of optimizing for medical care subsidies by saying, in the year that we're already going to lose our subsidy, let's go ahead and just take a lot of tax hits all in 1 year. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of math to find out if that makes sense as a long-term, just if it makes sense to like essentially pay, in the 30% plus tax bracket on some conversions to save on a subsidy and to get more of a subsidy in future years. So I'm about to start doing the math on that. And yeah, and it kind of hurts my head to think about it, but I'm going to put on my big girl pants and do the work, or I'm not going to do the work and I'm just going to miss out on the potential opportunity. We'll see. One of those two things will happen in the next 3 weeks. And yeah, I think on that note, we can wrap it up. We covered a lot of questions. Thank you to everyone for submitting them.
Yeah, they were great questions. It's really cool that many people, spent some time thinking of questions and topics.
Yeah. Would you be sad to know that I just submitted all those questions, Greg?
I'd be impressed, I guess, that you submitted that many, but also
Under
I
fake
guess
names.
a little sad that, yeah.
No, those were, real people. Some of them I even know. And others that I'd like to know. So thank you all for submitting some questions. We always appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, you can always give us a written review on Apple Podcasts and or a rating on Spotify. We really appreciate it.
We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. And you can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you have any thoughts or questions, like more questions you want to ask, we would love to hear from you. And you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370. Or you can hit us up on Instagram. And when you ask those questions, we either answer them in real time or we collect them for a future listener Q&A episode. Okay, thanks guys. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.